It is not enough to simply say, "I will not be evil." We must fight it wherever we find it. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm going to be talking about the first Chronicles of Druss the Legend by David Gemmell. And this is part of the Drenai series and acts as kind of a prequel about Druss from when we first meet him in Legend, where he is quite toward his later years. And so this is kind of going back in as seeing everything here with it. And it's been a while since I've done Legend, because I've been slowly doing Drenai over the last couple of years, which I think is probably helpful because I didn't remember a lot of the specific details of things he did, places he went. Like, some of it I remember, but not like all of the specifics, because he's given, plenty of backstory about who he was and what he did, but we just don't get to see how that actually happened. So I thought it was interesting in the afterword with the author discussing this, how he'd wanted to do something like this for a long time, but he wasn't fully sure, and the publisher wasn't fully sure on if it made sense to go back and tell the story of things that had already been mentioned, because, readers will know how it ends up. And he eventually decided to do it when he was at a convention talking to a huge fan who said, even though they knew everything that happened, they still wanted to see how it happened. And I think that works out really well here. And like I said, it might be partially because it's been a while since I've read Legend, but I really enjoy in all of the different Drenai books that I've read over different time frames, you really do get a lot of cool references and moments to the other books that make it, you feel like it's actually real in this one. Like, for example, here not only are we looking at Druss, but we have mentions of Waylander, and including there's a poet slash writer and everything who's actually written plays and songs and stuff about Waylander, very specifically, some that are really well known. And so you kind of have that feeling of seeing the legend be made, but also seeing more about how those legends actually come to be, and seeing what's true and what's not, because, Druss is definitely a legend when we first meet him in the book Legend, but things are never usually quite what they seem, and part of the themes of that book too was looking at this person who was larger than life, but was very human at the same time. So I really enjoyed getting to explore that here in an interesting way. And another thing that was mentioned to me afterward that I think is just a really interesting fact is David Gemmell said that he based the character of Druss off of his stepfather. And he gives it an example of how his stepfather was, and he talks about when he was very young and a kid, he was terrified of vampires, and that vampires were going to kill him. Apparently it was so bad, he was having like nightmares so bad that his mother took him to a specialist who, told him that vampires weren't real and that, he should just be fine. And of course that didn't work, and then one night he wakes up having a nightmare, and his stepfather comes in and he tells him that, oh my gosh, there's these vampires, or there was a vampire in the house that's trying to kill me. And his stepfather says, I know, I broke its neck. No vampires allowed in my house. And that he said he never had nightmares about vampires again. So it's a really interesting story, and just kind of that feel of that like larger than life character, and I think adds some depth. I really always love hearing the inspirations and the things that were going through Gemmell's mind when he wrote these books, because it's always interesting with some of the others as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the book itself, because this does do a lot of great things, and I really enjoyed this, even though, of course, we know kind of how some of these things are going to go. But we have the impetus of the story here is Druss, who is trying to rescue his wife, Rowena, who was taken and made into a slave. And we knew that had happened from Legend, and we knew also some of the events, some of the things that he did. But the way we see the legend being made in a couple of different ways, I just found really fascinating. There are some moments here where we find out essentially that those who can see the future and have like the power of prophecy and that type of thing seem like they've been like aware of Druss. He's such a pivotal person in history. He's such a huge part of so many big events that they've known this person was coming. They just didn't really know who it was, and I found that really fascinating. But also, we see that he's young. He's angry, he's rash, and he's not always making the best decisions. And there are moments too where, Rowena questions that, is he, by doing whatever it takes to rescue her, is he going to become as bad as the people that took her to begin with? And so you have a much more complex story and a complex look at what makes a hero and the nature of heroes as well. And there's a lot of commentary throughout, even though we're following our kind of stereotypical, hero. He's Druss. He's, a huge warrior. He's very strong. He just makes things happen. He has no fear and will do whatever it takes to meet his goal. There's also a lot of discussion on really what is a hero. And there's another line in here, besides the one that I said at the beginning, which is something that's told to Druss, along with the fact that he needs to have a code, and is told that, he should never do a lot of things that, bad men will do, and that men of power and everything will do, and like he should have that code and be better. But also there's a comment too where I think it was his father said to him in the book, if I recall, but talking about what makes a hero and how he wants to go off and fight in a war and become a soldier and be a hero. And it's pointed out to him that look here, the farmer who kept going at it after his crops failed 3 times and kept going and trying and didn't give up. Now that's a hero. Anyone can run off carrying a sword. That doesn't make you a hero or brave. It's easy to run away from your responsibilities. It's hard and brave to stay and make it work even though when things are tough. So there's a lot of commentary while we're seeing, it's still that heroic fantasy. We're still seeing Druss, but there's a lot of things that are more complex than meets the eye. And I liked the way that we see that. We also get to see, because he's traveling with his, poet friend, essentially, who is the one who's responsible for a lot of the legends and the exaggerations. And we get to see him over a large part of his life, too, where we see him start as just kind of seeming like this larger-than-life person who it's really easy to have all these things, but then see him get older and wiser and realize things and really have some introspection on himself as well and what he's thinking and what really is important. And so it does just a really, really great job with exploring these elements. I have to say once again, because I always mention it, it's really evident that Joe Abercrombie took inspiration from David Gemmell, although he went a very different way. Whereas Abercrombie is just the sarcasm, the, no faith in humanity, and the trying to kind of, satirize general fantasy tropes, that kind of thing. Gemmell is, even when things are dark and there are dark things in there, it's always the light at the end. It's always, you have some hope. There are good people. And that even though there's plenty of evil and there's plenty of crap in the world, that goodness can prevail and can succeed. And so you get that. But I've said before, and I'll say again, my favorite of Abercrombie's books, even though I'm not a huge fan of that author, is The Heroes, which kind of explores the idea of being a hero. But although that one goes so hard in the sarcastic, instead, in the first Chronicles of Druss, we get a lot of introspection. We get a lot of commentary, and there aren't necessarily answers to the question, but it gives you a lot to think about, and it puts a lot of different parts forward and still has that kind of, now a hero is not necessarily what you think. There are reasons Druss is the way that he is. There are reasons that Druss is doing what he's trying to do, and he doesn't always make the best decisions, and he's not always the best with it, but he is trying, and he's coming from a good place. But you have him kind of looking into himself. You have others seeing him and thinking, oh my gosh, what can happen here? And so even though obviously here that he's going to survive because he's, in the first book that was published, which is quite a bit after this is his life kind of leading up, there's still a lot of tension, and the moments where he's in danger or things are happening, they're used for really, really strong character growth and getting to see how he became the person that he became, because he is such an amazing character when we see him in Legend, and getting to see how he came up. And that, though, yes, some of it was just being big and strong and a fierce fighter and that kind of thing, there's definitely more to it as well. And I really enjoyed getting to explore that. This was just really nicely written, really interesting time. And I'm really interested. I have a Legend of Deathwalker next, which I know kind of does a parallel storyline with Legend as well. So I've just really, really enjoyed Drenai. I've not had one disappoint me. This one is probably in my upper half ones, which my gosh, it's hard trying to even think about where I would rate, because I've really enjoyed all of the ones that I've read so far. But this book just did a lot of interesting things, and it was a really great exploration of the evolution of a hero and the origins of a hero in some different ways than what you would expect. And what I think just, in a lot of what was done, it also just felt very modern as well. And that's something I think with Gemmell is he feels so ahead of the curve. Because although he's doing heroic fantasy, and although, yes, there are some archetypes that you're going to see in all of his books, there are a lot of similar themes and elements and characters. It is doing that heroic fantasy thing, often deals with, older characters as well, who are like kind of past their prime, and a lot of those things are explored. But the way that he develops characters, and even if it's just small characters, something I've noticed too that he's done in some of the later Drenai ones is he'll have these moments where he focuses on these small side characters, and you get these little vignettes, these little looks into their life. And in this book, you get one with a doctor who is taking care of somebody and telling them, they owe him just a ton of money, and they of course have no way of paying. And he says something like, oh, well, if you don't pay me, I'm gonna have to send you, or I'm gonna have to get the city guard involved, and you'll be sold into slavery to pay your debts and indentured. And of course he'd never do it, though. And you just kind of see that he's a person who cares about others and helping. And he's a very poor doctor, because most of the people that he treats can't really afford to pay. And then he uses what money he does get to help others too. And it's a character who's so not relevant to the overall story. Was relevant in a part there, but I just love the little looks and the way he'll explore these different characters. And it's, once again, it's sometimes the scenes are dark. In the book Winter Warriors, which is one that just, when I first read it, it wasn't one of my favorites necessarily. I enjoyed it, but the more it just sat with me. Such a phenomenal book, and that's something we get to explore there with several different characters and things seen. But this is just one to explore that, yes, we're dealing with a story where there's a lot of darkness in the world. There's a lot of people doing terrible things because they can, and it seems like there's really no way to stop it and prevent it. But getting to see there are still those glimpses of hope, and that's something I think that with Drenai and with the idea of heroic fantasy, it's that, there are heroes, if you can find them. It's not always who you expect them to be, but the fact that, we need more heroes and that there is hope. And so the way that the books are presented and the series are presented, they're just great. They're enjoyable to read, but also, instead of getting that kind of more modern, just super nihilistic or sarcastic, you get some hope here. And that's where I think it's really refreshing to read these kinds of books, especially when there's a lot of things always going darker, because that's what's in vogue right now. So it's really interesting to see these books and read them and have them just hold up so well as well, despite the fact that these have been out for a long time. It's just, I've had a great time with them. But those really are my thoughts on the first Chronicles of Druss, the Legend by David Gemmell. Like I said, definitely recommend that you check out Gemmell and Drenai in general. And there's a whole lot more Gemmell too, and I plan to read all of it eventually. But definitely let me know your thoughts on Drenai, Gemmell, any of that stuff, or any of the stuff that I said too, since I was pontificating on some other things as well. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description, as always, for the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, any books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.